Millionaire CEO rushed into a fake marriage for his dying father, but found true love. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The steady beep of machines filled the hospital room. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, heavy with the weight of goodbye. On the bed lay Mr. Donovan, once a powerful businessman, now frail and fading. His hand trembled as he gripped his son's. Standing beside him was Ethan Donovan, 30 years old, a millionaire CEO feared in boardrooms across the city. Tonight, his sharp gaze was clouded. He was not the ruthless executive everyone knew. He was just a son watching his father slip away. Ethan, his father's voice was thin, almost a whisper. Before I go, I want to see you married. I want to know you will not face this life alone. The words struck Ethan like a knife. Marriage had never been part of his plan. His empire demanded every ounce of his attention. But here, at his father's bedside, he could not argue. I promise, Father, Ethan said quietly, fighting the tightness in his throat. His father's eyes softened with relief. For Ethan, it was the one battle he could not win with power or money. Later that night, standing alone by the hospital window, Ethan stared at the city lights glittering below. His promise echoed in his mind. He had no fiancé, no love story waiting to unfold. The only way to keep his word was to build one out of nothing. A contract. A marriage based not on love, but on signatures and terms. Temporary, controlled, safe. But who would agree to such a deal? The answer appeared sooner than he expected. Across the street, in a small cafe, Ethan noticed a young woman struggling to keep up with the crowd. Her uniform hung loose on her frame, her hands unsteady as she carried a tray. A glass slipped, crashing onto the floor. The manager's voice cut across the room, sharp and humiliating. "Please, just give me one more chance," she whispered. Her eyes shone with exhaustion, yet there was dignity in her tone. Ethan watched her carefully. She was poor, yes, but there was something else, an undeniable strength beneath the weight she carried. Desperation, but also fire. When her shift ended, she pulled a worn coat tight around her and hurried to the bus stop. Ethan followed, his polished shoes stark against the cracked sidewalk. She sat alone, counting crumpled bills with shaking fingers. "Miss," his deep voice startled her. She turned, wary of the stranger in an expensive suit. "I have a proposition for you," he said without hesitation. "Marry me." Her lips parted in shock. I'm sorry, what did you just say?" "I need a wife. Right now." She stared, unable to believe what she was hearing. But his eyes held no trace of a joke. Ethan pulled a folder from his briefcase. Inside was a contract. A 6-figure payment, 90 days, no intimacy required. Just a marriage on paper. Her breath caught as she scanned the details. The money was enough to pay for her mother's hospital bills, enough to erase debts that haunted her every step. Her eyes lifted to his. "Why me?" "Because you need this as much as I do," Ethan answered firmly. The bus roared past, headlights sweeping over them, but she did not move. The contract felt heavy in her hands, like the weight of two different futures. One path was safe, the other was impossible. And yet, standing in the cold night with this stranger, she knew her choice would change both their lives forever. The night after the hospital and the bus stop felt unreal for her. She sat in her tiny apartment, the contract spread out across the rickety wooden table. The lamp above flickered, throwing shadows across the paper that promised more money than she had ever seen in her life. Her mother coughed from the bedroom, a harsh sound that broke her heart. Medical bills stacked on the counter. The eviction notice lay tucked beneath them. She pressed her hands over her face, whispering to herself, "What choice do I have?" Morning came too soon. She carried the contract in her worn leather bag and rode the bus back toward the city. The passengers around her stared at their phones, lost in their own lives. She stared out the window, each mile drawing her closer to the impossible decision. At the hospital, Ethan Donovan was waiting. He stood near the entrance in his tailored suit, dark eyes hidden behind expensive sunglasses. To everyone else, he looked like a man in control of the world. But inside, Ethan's thoughts were restless. His father's condition was deteriorating. Time was slipping away. He needed to keep his word. When she stepped off the bus, their eyes met. She hesitated, clutching her bag. Ethan stepped forward. "Have you decided?" His voice was calm, but firm. She took a long breath and nodded. "I will sign it." He gave a single nod in return, as if sealing a business deal. Yet for a brief moment, his gaze softened. Without another word, he led her through the hospital doors. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy. Nurses moved quietly through the corridors. Machines hummed steadily. When they entered his father's room, Mr. Donovan's eyes opened weakly. A faint smile touched his lips when he saw her standing beside his son. "Father," Ethan said gently, lowering his voice, "this is my wife." Her heart pounded. She forced herself to step closer, bowing her head respectfully. Mr. Donovan's frail hand reached for hers. She took it, startled by the fragile warmth of his touch. "Thank you," the old man whispered. "You have made me very happy." Tears blurred her vision. She had not expected this. She had agreed to a contract, to numbers on a page, but in this moment, she felt the weight of something far more human. The ceremony was arranged quickly. No grand cathedral, no sparkling chandeliers, no lavish gown. Just a small hospital chapel with dim lighting and a tired priest who had seen too many goodbyes. Ethan slipped a simple silver band onto her finger, his expression unreadable. She returned the gesture with shaking hands. The vows were spoken, plain and mechanical. For better or worse, in sickness and in health. Each word felt like a line from a script. Yet when she glanced at Ethan, she caught the shadow of something deeper behind his cold exterior. After the brief ceremony, Ethan guided her back to his father's room. Mr. Donovan's eyes filled with tears as he looked at the rings on their hands. "My boy," he whispered, "you have given me peace." Ethan squeezed his father's shoulder gently, then glanced at her. Their eyes met. For a fleeting second, there was an unspoken understanding between them. This was not just about business anymore. Later that evening, after Mr. Donovan drifted into sleep, Ethan walked her out of the hospital. The city air was sharp, the streetlights casting long shadows. He stopped beneath the glow of one lamp and turned to her. "You kept your word," she said softly, breaking the silence. "And so did you," Ethan replied. His voice carried no warmth, but not the same icy edge from before. She shifted uncomfortably. "I do not know what comes next. I only know I cannot fail my mother. This money, it will save her." "You will not fail," Ethan said. "But remember, this is a contract, 90 days, no feelings, no complications." She lifted her chin, her pride flickering despite the fear inside her. "I agreed to the terms. I will not break them." For a long moment, he studied her, his jaw tight. Finally, he gave a small nod and opened the door of a sleek black car waiting by the curb. "Come, you are moving into my home tonight." Her breath caught. She had expected time, perhaps days before the act became real. But Ethan was a man of precision. When he made a decision, the world shifted instantly. She climbed into the car, her fingers brushing against the unfamiliar diamond band now on her hand. The leather seat smelled of wealth, polished and cold. Outside, the city blurred past as they drove toward a future neither of them could predict. As skyscrapers rose higher and neon lights flickered across the windshield, one thought echoed in her mind. She had stepped into a world built on money, contracts, and power. Yet somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that life never followed the rules of a contract for long. The car rolled through the city until it stopped in front of a towering glass building. Her eyes widened as she looked up at the penthouse where she would now live. It felt like another world, a place she did not belong. She held her bag tightly as Ethan stepped out first, his tall figure confident and unshaken. When he turned back to her, his tone was brisk. "Come inside. From this moment, you are Mrs. Donovan." The words hit her like a weight, Mrs. Donovan. A name that was not hers, yet it was now printed on a marriage certificate and sealed with a ring on her finger. She followed him through the grand lobby, past marble floors that gleamed like mirrors and a staff who bowed politely to their employer. Their eyes flickered with curiosity when they saw her, but no one dared ask questions. The elevator carried them up to the top floor, and when the doors opened, she stepped into a world of wealth she had only seen in movies. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. A grand piano stood in one corner. Crystal lights hung above like frozen raindrops. Every detail whispered of power and money. "This is where you will stay," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "You will have your own room. There are rules." She swallowed nervously. "What kind of rules?" He crossed the room and poured himself a glass of water before answering. "First, you are not to enter my private office. Second, we appear together in public whenever necessary, and we act as a married couple. Third, once 90 days are over, you leave with your payment. No questions asked." Her hands tightened around the strap of her bag. "And what about your family? What about the people who will notice?" "They will believe what I tell them," Ethan said flatly. "My father has already seen the ring. That was all that mattered." She looked down at her own hand. The silver band sparkled faintly under the chandelier. It felt heavy. Not because of its weight, but because of what it symbolized. A promise that was never real. Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "The board of directors is demanding a dinner this week. They want to meet you. They want to make sure this marriage is real." Her stomach dropped. "A dinner? But I do not know how to act in that kind of world." "You will learn," Ethan said, cutting her off. "I will have a stylist prepare you. You will follow instructions. As long as you keep quiet and smile when necessary, you will be fine." Something inside her bristled. "I am not a puppet." For the first time, his gaze softened slightly, though his tone did not. "This is not about you. This is about my father's peace and my company's stability. Do your part, and you will walk away with more than you ever dreamed." She looked around the penthouse once more. Expensive art on the walls, fresh flowers arranged by staff, a kitchen larger than her entire apartment. It all felt cold. Beautiful, but cold. That night, she sat alone in the guest bedroom. The bed was soft, the sheets crisp, but she could not sleep. She thought of her mother back in the small apartment, of the hospital bills waiting to be paid, of the way Ethan had spoken to her, as if she were nothing more than another deal to be managed. She whispered into the darkness, "What have I gotten myself into?" The next morning, the house staff knocked on her door with boxes of dresses, shoes, and jewelry. A stylist fussed over her hair, smoothing every strand, while another laid out gowns that shimmered under the light. She stood in front of the mirror, wearing silk she could never afford, diamonds that did not belong to her. When Ethan walked in, his eyes scanned her from head to toe. For a second, he said nothing. Then, with a slight nod, he murmured, "You will do." His words stung, but she lifted her chin. "I am not doing this for you. I am doing this for my mother." "Remember that," Ethan replied coolly. "It will make the act more believable." 2 nights later, the dinner arrived. The board of directors gathered in a private room of a luxury restaurant. Men in tailored suits and women in glittering gowns greeted Ethan with smiles that carried calculation. When he introduced her as his wife, all eyes turned toward her. She felt their gazes like sharp blades. Some smiled politely, others whispered behind their glasses of wine. One of the older board members leaned forward. "So, Mrs. Donovan, tell us how you met our CEO." Her throat tightened. She glanced at Ethan, searching for guidance. His expression gave nothing away. She forced herself to smile, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "We met by chance," she said softly. "It was unexpected, but sometimes life surprises us." The table laughed lightly, charmed by her simple answer. Ethan's eyes flickered toward her, unreadable, but for the first time, she thought she saw the shadow of a smile. The performance had only just begun. The dinner with the board had been only the beginning. In the days that followed, her life in the penthouse shifted into something she could hardly recognize. Every morning, the house staff arrived with schedules, wardrobes, and instructions. There were social events to attend, business gatherings where she had to stand at Ethan's side, and photographs that captured them together as the perfect married couple. Yet behind the doors of the penthouse, the truth was very different. Ethan was distant. He worked late hours in his private office, emerging only for appearances. When they crossed paths in the kitchen or the hallway, his words were clipped, professional, as if she were an employee rather than a wife. At first, she tried to stay quiet. After all, this was what she had agreed to. 90 days, a contract, nothing more. But living under the same roof made silence impossible. One evening, she found herself in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, preparing a simple meal. She was tired of endless catered dishes that looked like art but tasted like nothing. The smell of garlic and onions filled the air. When Ethan walked in, his expression shifted in surprise. "What are you doing?" he asked sharply. "Cooking," she replied without looking up. "Something normal, something real." His brow furrowed. "We have staff for that." "I know," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But food is more than just fuel. It is comfort. It is care. Something money cannot always buy." For a moment, the silence between them was heavy. He watched her move around the kitchen, her hands steady, her expression focused. It was the first time he had seen her in control, unafraid of him. Finally, he muttered, "Suit yourself." But instead of leaving, he sat at the counter and watched as she placed a plate in front of him. "Eat," she said. He hesitated, then picked up the fork. The first bite caught him off guard. It was simple, yet it carried warmth he had not felt in years. Without meaning to, he finished the plate. She smiled faintly as she cleared the dishes, but neither spoke of it again. The small clashes continued. She left books scattered across the living room. He complained about the mess. She laughed at the absurdity of his perfectly aligned schedules. He scolded her for being careless. Yet beneath every argument, something shifted. The distance between them shrank, little by little, replaced by a fragile thread neither could ignore. A week later, they attended a charity gala. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers. Gowns glittered like oceans of jewels, and the city's wealthiest gathered to whisper and scheme. Ethan walked in with her on his arm, every camera flashing to capture the sight. She held her head high, though her stomach churned. Throughout the night, she noticed the way people looked at her, some with envy, others with disdain. A group of women whispered behind their champagne glasses, their laughter sharp and cruel. She caught words like gold digger and temporary. Her chest tightened, but she forced herself to stand tall. When she excused herself to the balcony for air, she did not expect Ethan to follow. He found her leaning against the railing, the city lights stretching out like a sea of stars. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly. She turned to him, her eyes flashing. "Do you not hear them? They look at me as if I am dirt, as if I do not deserve to stand beside you." By Mull, Ethan's jaw tightened. "People will always talk." She shook her head. "It does not hurt me that they judge me. It hurts me that you let them. You never defend me. You stand there and let them believe their lies." His silence was sharp. He had no answer. For years, Ethan had cared only about control, appearances, power. Defending someone else's honor had never been part of his world. But her words cut through the armor he wore. Later that night, as they left the gala, photographers swarmed them outside the hotel. Shouts filled the air, cameras flashed in their faces. The questions grew harsher, more invasive. "Is she really your wife? How much did you pay her?" Her steps faltered, panic rising. In that moment, Ethan slipped off his coat and draped it around her shoulders, pulling her close against him. The cameras caught everything, the protective gesture, the way his arm tightened around her, the rare softness in his eyes. For the first time, he acted not as a businessman protecting his image, but as a man shielding his wife. That night, back in the penthouse, she sat quietly on the couch, still wrapped in his coat. The scent of him clung to the fabric. Ethan stood across the room, silent, as if unsure of what he had just done. Neither spoke, but both knew something had changed. The contract was still in place. 90 days remained on paper. But the unspoken rules had begun to crack. And once cracks formed, the walls never stayed standing for long. The scandal outside the gala did not fade as quickly as Ethan hoped. By the next morning, their photographs were splashed across tabloids and business magazines. Headlines screamed accusations. Millionaire CEO's marriage a sham, and who is the mysterious wife of Ethan Donovan? She sat at the breakfast table, staring at the glossy cover of one magazine. Her own face was there, caught mid-step, Ethan's coat draped around her shoulders. The image looked romantic, almost tender, but the words printed beneath cut like knives. Gold digger, social climber, pretend bride. Her hand trembled as she set the magazine down. Ethan entered the room, his expression dark as he tossed his phone on the counter. The board wants answers. They are furious. She looked up at him, her voice quiet but steady. Do you believe them? Ethan's eyes met hers, sharp and unreadable. What I believe does not matter. What the world believes is the problem. Her chest tightened. She wanted him to say no. She wanted him to defend her, not with gestures under flashing cameras, but with words. Yet his silence was louder than anything he could have spoken. Later that day, the company arranged a press conference. Ethan was expected to address the rumors. She was told to attend, to stand at his side, to smile as if nothing was wrong. The conference room was filled with reporters, cameras blinking like restless eyes. Ethan stood at the podium, powerful and composed, while she sat quietly in the front row. The questions flew fast. Why did no one know about your relationship before? Is it true your marriage is only on paper? What do you say to claims that she is using you for money? Ethan raised a hand to silence the crowd. His voice was calm, measured. My marriage is private. I do not owe the world explanations for how I choose to live my life. The reporters pressed harder, their words harsh. She kept her eyes down, refusing to let them see her tears. But the humiliation burned inside her. When it was finally over, she left the room quickly. She did not wait for Ethan. She needed air, space, distance from the suffocating walls of wealth and suspicion. She walked the quiet streets near the office, clutching her coat tighter around her. For the first time, she questioned whether the money was worth the price. That evening, when Ethan returned to the penthouse, he found her sitting on the balcony, staring out at the city. Her hair blew softly in the wind, her posture small against the vast skyline. You disappeared after the conference, he said, his voice edged with concern. She turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Do you know how it feels to be called a liar, a thief, a parasite? To have strangers write your life story as if you are nothing but a headline? Ethan's jaw tightened. It is part of being in the public eye. No, she snapped, standing to face him. It is part of being your wife, and you let them tear me apart while you stood silent. For once, Ethan had no defense. He saw the pain in her eyes, the truth in her words. She was not just a name on a contract. She was a woman drowning in a storm she never asked for. He stepped closer, his voice lower. I did not realize how much this would cost you. Her hands trembled as she whispered. All I wanted was to save my mother. I never asked for this life. I never asked to be paraded like some investment. No. Silence stretched between them. Ethan had faced hostile investors, ruthless competitors, and boardroom betrayals. But this quiet accusation from the woman he had pulled into his world shook him in a way nothing else ever had. Later that week, another event forced them together again. A charity auction hosted by one of Ethan's longtime rivals. Cameras followed them as they entered the grand hall. She wore a gown chosen by the stylist, her smile polite, her posture perfect. On the surface, she played the role of the devoted wife flawlessly. But when the rival's fiancé, a glamorous socialite, leaned in and whispered, "We all know this marriage is fake. Do not get too comfortable," the words cut deep. For the rest of the evening, she stayed silent, hiding the storm inside her. Ethan noticed. He saw the way her smile faltered, the way her eyes lost their light. And for the first time, anger sparked within him, not at her, but at the world that judged her so cruelly. When they returned home, Ethan poured himself a drink, then turned to her. They do not deserve to speak about you that way. She looked up, startled. You defended me? Not out loud, he admitted. But I will. Her heart ached at the words. She wanted to believe him, but the distance between them was still wide. That night, as she lay in the guest room, she touched the silver band on her finger. It had started as a symbol of a deal. Yet slowly, against every rule written in their contract, it was beginning to mean something more. And deep down, she feared that meaning would cost her more than she could bear. The days after the charity auction grew heavier with silence. She kept mostly to herself, spending long hours on the balcony or curled up with books from the penthouse library. Ethan buried himself in meetings and phone calls, yet every time he returned home, he could feel the tension pressing through the air like an unspoken storm. One evening, she found herself in the hospital again, this time sitting at her mother's bedside. The machines beeped steadily, a cruel reminder of time slipping away. She held her mother's frail hand, whispering softly, "Just hold on a little longer. I am doing everything I can." Her mother's eyes opened weakly, a faint smile spreading across her lips. "You look tired, my dear? Are you happy?" The question struck her harder than she expected. Happy? She thought of the penthouse, the gowns, the cameras, the contract. None of it felt like happiness, but she could not let her mother see the truth. She forced a smile. "I am fine, Mother. Do not worry about me." When she returned to the penthouse late that night, she found Ethan still awake. He sat in the living room, papers spread across the glass table, a half-empty glass of whiskey beside him. His tie was loosened, his expression weary. "You went to the hospital," he said quietly without looking up. She hesitated in the doorway. "Yes. My mother is stable. For now." His eyes lifted to hers. For once, there was no coldness, only fatigue. "You should not have to carry this alone." The words caught her off guard. She had expected indifference, not concern. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You say that, but you do not understand. I walk into rooms where people tear me apart with their eyes. I stand next to you and hear them whisper that I am nothing. And you let it happen." Ethan's jaw tightened. He set down his glass and rose to his feet. "Do you think it is easy for me? I am fighting a board that wants to remove me. I am holding an empire together while my father lies in a hospital bed. I brought you into this world to make him happy, not to destroy you. But now I see what it is doing to you." For the first time, his voice cracked. She froze, stunned by the rawness in his tone. This was not the invincible CEO. This was a man unraveling. She whispered, "Why do you not show them who I really am? Why do you not defend me out loud?" His chest rose and fell heavily. "Because I thought silence would protect you. But maybe I was wrong." The air between them shifted. Neither moved, yet something invisible pulled them closer. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the cracks in the armor he wore so tightly. And he, in turn, saw the fire in hers, the strength she carried, despite the weight on her shoulders. Later that week, another test arrived. A scandalous article leaked online, claiming their marriage was forged through a contract. It described details too specific to be rumor terms, deadlines, even the mention of a six-figure payment. The story spread like wildfire. When she saw it, her knees nearly buckled. The words on the screen screamed betrayal. Someone knew. Someone had exposed them. By the time Ethan arrived at the penthouse, she was already packing a small bag. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling as she stuffed clothes into it. "What are you doing?" Ethan demanded, his voice sharp with alarm. She turned to him, her face pale. "You promised no one would ever know. You promised this would stay between us. And now the world knows. Do you have any idea what they will do to me? To my mother?" Ethan stepped forward, his chest tight. "I did not leak this. I would never It does not matter." She cut him off, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It is out there, and now I am nothing but a lie on every newsstand." He reached for her arm, but she pulled away. "Do not. Please, do not make this harder. I should leave before it destroys me completely." "Ho." For a long moment, Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. He had built his life on control, but now he was losing the one thing he could not afford to lose. Finally, his voice dropped, quiet but fierce. "If you walk out that door, the world wins. They take everything from you and from me. But if you stay, I will fight. Not for the company, not for the board, for you." She froze, breath caught in her chest. It was the first time he had said it, the first time he had spoken of fighting, not as a CEO, but as a man. Her bag slipped from her hand. For the first time since signing that contract, she felt a glimmer of something she never expected. Hope. The 90 days were still ticking, but the lines of their agreement were no longer holding. The rules were breaking, and so were the walls around their hearts. The article spread faster than either of them imagined. Within hours, television networks and online platforms replayed the same headlines. Contract marriage exposed. The media swarmed outside the penthouse, cameras flashing every time the door opened. Paparazzi camped on the street, shouting questions into the night. Inside, she sat on the edge of the guest bed, clutching the silver ring on her finger. The weight of humiliation pressed down on her chest. Every cruel word from the tabloids echoed in her mind. Fraud. Pretend bride. Bought wife. She wanted to disappear. Ethan stood in the living room, phone pressed to his ear as his legal team shouted updates. Find out who leaked this. Trace every call, every message. I want names. His voice was cold, lethal, the tone of a man used to crushing enemies. But when he ended the call and saw her standing in the doorway, pale and trembling, his expression faltered. They will not stop, she whispered, her voice breaking. They will not rest until they ruin me. Mardo. Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides. I will not let them. She shook her head, tears streaming. Do you not see? They already have. They dragged my name through the mud. My mother saw the news. She cried because she thought her daughter had sold herself. Her words cut deep, sharper than any boardroom betrayal. For the first time in years, Ethan felt powerless. But in that powerlessness, something inside him broke free. He took her hands in his voice steady but burning with conviction. The contract may have started this, but my feelings are not a contract. They are real. I am not ashamed of you, and I will not hide anymore. Her breath caught. You mean that? Ethan's eyes locked on hers. I will tell the world myself. I will tell them you are my wife. Not because of a contract, but because I choose you. She stared at him, torn between disbelief and the fragile hope growing in her chest. But what about the board? What about your position as CEO? He exhaled, a shadow of a smile crossing his face. Let them come for it. Let them strip me of everything. You are worth more than this company. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken fear and trembling courage. For the first time, she saw the man behind the empire, not the cold millionaire CEO, but a son who kept a promise to his dying father, a man who now stood ready to risk everything for her. She pressed her forehead against his chest, her tears soaking into his shirt. If you fall because of me, I will never forgive myself. Ethan's arms wrapped around her tightly. Then we fall together, but we do not run. The decision was made. Tomorrow, the world would hear the truth. And it would no longer be the truth of contracts and signatures, but of a man willing to stake his empire on love. The next morning, the press gathered in front of the Donovan corporate headquarters. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones in hand, cameras rolling. The story had reached a fever pitch. Investors threatened to pull out, the board prepared an emergency meeting, and the public demanded answers. Ethan arrived in a black car, his posture unshaken, his expression set like stone. She sat beside him, her hands clenched in her lap. The closer they drew to the building, the louder the crowd became. She whispered, "You do not have to do this. You can still protect your position." By Verks, Ethan turned to her, his voice calm but resolute. "My position means nothing if I cannot protect you." The car door opened, and the chaos of flashing lights and shouted questions flooded around them. Ethan took her hand firmly and guided her through the crowd. For the first time, he did not shield her behind his coat or let her walk alone. He walked beside her, fingers locked with hers, making a silent declaration that the world could not miss. Inside, the boardroom buzzed with tension. Senior members sat at the long polished table, their expressions stern, some even hostile. One man spoke first, his tone sharp. "Ethan, this scandal has cost us millions in shareholder confidence. If you do not end this farce, the board will vote you out." Ethan rose to his full height, his hand never leaving hers. His voice rang out, steady and commanding. "You call it a farce. I call it my marriage. Yes, it began with a contract. That much is true. But what began as duty has become my choice. And I will not deny my wife to satisfy your image of me." Gasps echoed around the room. Another director leaned forward, his voice dripping with disdain. "Do you realize what you are saying? You are choosing her over this company, over everything your family built." Ethan met his gaze without flinching. "I am choosing honesty. I am choosing love. If that costs me this chair, then so be it." She squeezed his hand tightly, her heart pounding. For so long, she had been afraid of what the world thought, of what his silence meant. But now, Hearing him stand in front of the most powerful men in the city and declare his truth, her fear began to crumble. The board erupted in arguments, voices overlapping, threats flying. But Ethan remained unmoved. He placed both hands on the table and said firmly, "I will not sign her away. And if this company cannot accept that, then this company does not deserve me." Shuar. When he pulled her out of the boardroom, the press was waiting once again. This time, Ethan faced the cameras directly. His voice carried across the crowd. "Yes, there was a contract. But what the papers will never tell you is that somewhere along the way, I stopped following rules on paper and started following my heart. This woman is my wife, not because of an agreement, but because I cannot imagine my life without her." The flashes were blinding. Reporters shouted questions, but Ethan did not waver. He slipped his arm around her shoulders, holding her close as if daring anyone to challenge what he had said. She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with tears. For the first time since stepping into this arrangement, she no longer felt like a stranger in his world. She felt like his choice. And that choice was worth more than any empire. The storm of cameras and questions did not fade overnight, but something inside her had changed. For the first time, she no longer felt like she was hiding behind a false title. Ethan had stood in front of the world and chosen her, not the board, not the company, not his empire her. That truth gave her a strength she never knew she had. The following week, Ethan called for another press conference, this one on his own terms. Reporters filled the hall, expecting a resignation or another scandal. Instead, Ethan walked out holding her hand, his expression calm, his shoulders unburdened. He spoke clearly, his voice steady. "You all know the rumors. Yes, our marriage began with a contract. But what you have seen in these past weeks was never part of any agreement. You cannot write love into a contract. You cannot fake sacrifice. I stand here today not as a CEO defending his image, but as a man who refuses to be ashamed of the woman he loves." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing every word. She felt her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with pride. Then, in front of everyone, Ethan reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside gleamed 2 rings, not the plain silver bands from their rushed ceremony, but new ones, real ones. He turned to her, lowering his voice so only she could hear, though the microphones picked up every syllable. "The first rings were part of a deal. These are a promise. No end date, no signatures. Only us." Her hands shook as he slid the ring onto her finger. Tears blurred her vision, and she placed the other ring on his hand in return. The crowd erupted in flashes of light, but in that moment, the world fell away. Later, back at the penthouse, she sat on the balcony wrapped in Ethan's coat, staring out at the city. He joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "I may have lost part of the company today," he admitted softly, "but I gained something far greater. All for one." She leaned into him, whispering, "You kept your promise to your father. But you also gave me something I never expected. A real marriage. A real home." Ethan kissed her forehead gently. "No more contracts, no more pretending, just us." The silver bands of their past lay tucked away in a drawer, a reminder of how it all began. The new rings glimmered in the moonlight, a symbol of something stronger than wealth, stronger than scandal, stronger than power. It was love born from a lie, tested by the weight of the world, and sealed with truth. And for the first time, both of them knew it would last forever.